Hello, everyone. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. It is the 8th of November, 2022. Robbie Triano is here, as he is every single Tuesday. For Tuesday Takes, we talk about the Big 12 title race this year, which is, still just red hot right now as we have 3 games left. The future of the Kansas Jayhawks football program as they are bowl bound. Texas TCU in a game day featured clash this week. Why they are polar opposites. Plus, why does Neal Brown still have the head coaching job as it sits right now at West Virginia? All that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast, Josh Neighbors here. Thank you guys for making us a part of your day. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. We are brought to you today by the folks at Sling TV. Nowhere else to get your TV right now, as football and basketball season are both heating up. It's crazy. We had a full day of Big 12 hoops yesterday, Robbie. I know you have the podcast. Obviously, not everybody left unscathed. The Sooners got caught yesterday with their pants down and lost to Sam Houston State, who I do not believe has a very good basketball tradition. They're in the tournament like sometimes, I feel like, but they're kind of more known as a FCS power. So long day yesterday, 10 games, started at noon. How was your viewing experience as you watched all those games?
Early season basketball is just not very good. I'm just going to let you know, not very good. Especially Big 12 teams are pretty good. Everyone else stinks. And even the Big 12 teams right now are not very good because they have to tune up a little bit. Oklahoma, that's a team that, yes, we're sad they're leaving the Big 12, but in terms of basketball, it's not going to hurt the league at all.
Yeah.
So I have no problem saying that team is meh. But there are some really, really, really awesome teams in this league. Kansas and Baylor are going to be unbelievable. So it's weird to go from football to basketball. It was even funny during the podcast I'm recording, the Midwest Madness podcast, doing all things Big 12 hoops. I meant to say Mike Boynton and forgot to edit it. I said Mike Gundy. So we are currently, we are currently in football mode going into basketball mode. So I have to stay strong.
It does happen. And yeah, you're right. Watching, especially the transfer portal age, watching all these 18 to 22-year-olds play in November when none of them played together at all is like, it's all, I was watching my Missouri Tigers last night and I was like, wow, these guys, it looks like they've played about 2 months of pickup together, which is about, it's about where all these teams are right now. Teams that have played 2 months of actual football together. Let's move on to that. Yes. The Big 12 title race is bananas. That is the way that you pitched it to me. Just for some more context, I got the picture of the title race, and let me get the banner out of the way really fast so we can look at it. But really, the upshot here is, look, it is now a 4-team race. This weekend, it's gonna be. There is a world in which a three-loss team does go. But the thing is that Baylor's got to play Kansas State and Baylor has to play Texas, right? So with that in mind, like 2 of those 3 teams are going to go to 2 losses in that kind of pairing of games, right? And then also TCU's got to play both Texas and Baylor. So things are going to be very, very interesting the rest of the way. But Robbie, it is a 4-team race, and the only other league really that can say that right now, and we have to give them some credit, is the Pac-12. It's been a really exciting race there. But the Big 12, top to bottom, has just been more competitive as a league, and that's what's given us, this. There is in the Pac-12 a beating up on, you beat up on Colorado, and you get to play a little Arizona action. How about you chuck some Cal in there? What about a nice trip with Stanford? How about Arizona State? What I just give you there? 4 or 5 schools I just listed off to you. Nice little break. There's none of that here. There's absolutely none of that in this league at all. And, West Virginia got the Big 12 win against Baylor, who's currently fighting for a championship right now. So that's kind of where this league is. And it's going to be a fight to the finish, it looks like.
Yeah, and why I say it's bananas is I think 2 weeks ago we said, all right, TCU, Oklahoma State, that's going to be the final. Okay, Oklahoma State just now had 3 straight, like they're doing bad. Oklahoma State is down bad. You just lose to Kansas. Okay, all right, Baylor's out. No, Baylor's definitely in this. All right, Kansas State, it's going to be TCU and Kansas State without a doubt. And then Kansas State loses at home to Texas, to a team that we thought that was also going to be dead. This race is bananas. The one constant is that TCU is in the title game. I don't think there's a question. They are the best team in the Big 12 right now. But when it comes to the race to be that number 2 team in the league, it is very much up for grabs. And that loss this weekend by Kansas State puts a wrench in everything. But I want to go through the resumes of what these teams have left when it comes to Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State. So Texas has TCU this weekend. It is home, and that is by far their hardest remaining game. And that one is really tricky because if they win, I think we can put Texas in the title game. But then they play Kansas, who, not going to say they're going to beat them, and then Baylor. Then Baylor has by far the hardest. Kansas State, TCU, both at home and at Texas. And then Kansas State has at Baylor, at West Virginia, and Kansas, the easiest 3-game stretch. This game this weekend that we will get to with TCU and Texas determines the entire race. And right now, I think if Texas were to win, they will be in. And honestly, I think they could win the whole thing. Like, Texas is a team to me that can still win the Big 12 title, and that is crazy. But if Kansas State were to win out and have some chaos happen, they can be. So this race right now is crazy because 2 of those teams I did not see being in this race still, and that's Baylor and Texas. It's nuts.
I thought that Baylor would be there, and I was kind of thinking that this league would be like, I think it would be it was gonna be like a 10-2 team and then a 9-3 team, which it still might be in the Big 12 championship game. Texas, I'd said from the beginning that if they made it there, I thought they would win it, because if Texas made the Big 12 champion, just think about it like the start of the season. If Texas makes the Big 12 championship game, we're sitting there in September. What does that mean, Robbie? Well, that means really everything went right. And funny enough, I don't feel like everything's gone right for them, right?
No.
And they're still right here. And I think normally that we think if things go sideways for Texas, they go sideways in a pretty, hysterical way at times. And for them, it's been like, okay, our quarterback was injured and we lost to Alabama. Our quarterback was injured and we lost focus again. We lost Texas Tech. And then the Oklahoma State game was a complete debacle. But that Oklahoma State game is kind of the one where you look at and like, that's kind of classic Texas. The Texas Tech game that one's difficult just because there's no Quinn Ewers, right? So, you kind of give them a pass, but they did blow a lead there. And then the Alabama game, you do give them a complete pass because of the way that went down. And TCU is obviously the shocker. They just need to win one of the last 3, right? They technically have not booked their ticket yet, but if they win one of the last 3, even if it is that Iowa State game, because of the tie-breaking scenario, and because of the fact that Baylor must still play Texas, right? They will be in there, right? They will be in there. So it's interesting with those 2 teams being there. Baylor and Kansas State were the ones that we thought would be there, right? Or maybe be around. You and I had talked about that path Baylor took, and it's weird because they're now playing the type of football, or good football at least, that I think a lot of people thought they could play at the beginning of the year. But what's weird about it is I'm not sure how good that team is, right? What do they do well? They run the football pretty well. Not sure what else they do very well, right? Blake Shapen's kind of a question mark on a game-to-game basis. They don't take great care of the football all the time, especially Blake Shapen. They did force, I think the big difference, Robbie, for them against Oklahoma was the number of turnovers they forced, right? I mean, they were giving up on the ground. They gave up 500 total yards of offense. The big thing was they forced 3 interceptions, right? That's the huge thing that swung the game for them, that allowed them to run the football more and control it. And then Kansas State obviously is here, and through some means, really not all by the quarterback thing for them. I think it's impressive the fact that they've had that issue and they're still right here at the end, right? We knew it was a team that had a chance, and I think that speaks to the depth of the team that we talked about coming into the year. Hey, look, despite the fact we're ping-ponging quarterbacks and one's look good, but it's only been for a game and a half. One was good at certain times, Adrian Martinez, and now we're here. It's funny to see how we got to this Final Four. And it's weird to think that TCU, I know they have their drawbacks in terms of how they play, but there are no blemishes on their resume.
Yeah, so if I were to make you pick which team is the most likely and the least likely to make the title game. Out of those three, my least likely, and I said this last week, I was actually pretty strong about it on this show last week. I said there's no way for Baylor to make the title game, and I'm sticking true to that. Their last 3 wins. Kansas, bad Kansas team. Not like beginning of the year Kansas team, the bad Kansas team that we've seen this year.
And that thing got close. That thing got real close late.
Texas Tech, they are struggling right now.
Yeah.
And they cannot find an answer at quarterback, and Baron Morton is actually hurt. And then you play Oklahoma. Great performance against Oklahoma running the football. I mean, Oklahoma has a good offense, not an elite offense. So for you to win that game, good, but I don't consider an Oklahoma team to be very good at all. I think that defense is actually just bad. And Blake Shapen did not necessarily have a great performance. So you win 3 games against, I would consider, some of the worst teams in the Big 12. And now we're saying, yeah, they're going to win the Big 12. No. Kansas State, TCU, Texas. That's how you win the season. What I consider the 3 best teams in the league. Good luck. I do not see Baylor winning it at all. I am a Kansas State guy. I am confused on how that last game went. I really thought Will Howard was going to be the starter. I don't know if they had necessarily an amazing impact on it because Adrian Martinez did play well. But the fact that they couldn't get their offense going early to put themselves in that big of a hole against Texas, like, I really do think if that game was like 5 minutes longer, Kansas State would have won. But that's not how the game is played. Texas has a real issue when it comes to the second half. It just blows my mind. But that game is really, really, really upsetting. Because if Kansas State wins that, it's like lock TCU, Kansas State in the title game. So it's for me, I'm difficult to pick who would be the better team out of those 2, Texas and Kansas State. But Texas just won, so I think Texas would have the best shot of those 3.
Yeah, I think you have to say right now it is TCU is obviously in pole position, right? They don't have to beat one of those teams we talked about. I would say the team that is second most likely, I mean, you want to go with Texas, but it's hard to because of the way they have played later on in games. Baylor, yeah, I'm least confident with, and then I would say Kansas State third. And the reason why you have to put them third is because, well, the tiebreak situation here is they are a loss down to Texas, but out of the remaining teams, you like Kansas State's schedule the best because what's remaining for them is at Baylor, at West Virginia, and then they get the Sunshine Showdown in at KSU. So I don't think the Wildcats are out of this thing. They're lucky that the team ahead of them is very good at losing and finding ways to lose at times. And I think that's where we are right now. But the fact that we're going to get, like, every single weekend, there are games you can point to. I mean, you go to the Big 12 schedule, Robbie, week after week after week, and you can point to a game that was like, all right, this is just, it's so significant because of this, right? It feels like 7:00 on Fox or FS1, considering when the World Series is happening or Championship Series is happening. You can pencil in a really important game in the Big 12 race, and I think that's awesome. It's really exciting. So let's just go next to that game we're talking about this weekend, the TCU and Texas game. We're just gonna call it opposite day, Robbie. I think I know where you're going with this, but you said to me, look, these teams are opposites. I think a lot of us know why, but once again, lay it out for us why they are opposites.
I think they're similar teams when it comes to talent. I think they have elite playmakers on offense. I think they have an average defense. I think a defense that can win you a game when your offense is that good. But the thing about these teams, they are polar opposites when it comes to what they do during each half. Texas, first half, oh my God, this is the best football team of all time. Texas, second half, why can't they score? Why is the other team now knocking at the door? TCU, first half, oh God, why are they down 14 at halftime? Second half, this is the best football team I've ever seen. I am so intrigued on how this game is going to go based on that and what I've seen, that it's not just like a one-time thing. This has been a trend for the whole season and for Texas for 2 seasons now with Steve Sarkisian. Like, this is what Texas does. Early lead, they'll blow it. TCU, first half failures, second half, amazing, with really good defensive performances. I am intrigued on how big Texas will make this lead. I hope that TCU, not hope, that's not a good word. I want to see if TCU can actually do something in the first half to like make sure it's not that big of a deficit going into halftime. And then can Texas finally do something in the second half offensively? Like, can they?
Right. Right.
That's why I'm so intrigued by this game.
The live line would be watch the way the line's going to like move during the game is going to be really interesting because, when Texas inevitably goes up 2 scores in the first half, you're wondering, hey, what kind of value can I get on TCU? Or will Vegas wise up and be like, no, we're not going to give you TCU plus 18, right? We're not going to give you TCU, plus 14 and a half. What's interesting about this game, Robbie, is the one thing I think that Texas has an advantage in, and it's going to be one decider too, is Quentin Johnston going to play, right? Was that a move last week to pull him because you're worried about the next week game and you don't want to go further injury? And we don't need Quentin Johnston to tough it out against Texas Tech to get a win. But the one thing that if he does play, I'm really interested in is Texas run defense. They've been really, really good. They were awesome last week. They've been one of the best. I mean, nobody's really had a great time running the football against Texas this year. And that is one part of the TCU offense. While I think some of the play calling in regards to the run game will come and go, the run game's effectiveness has been there all year. And this team can bomb it on you. They're a purely passing offense, but I'm really curious to see what is the strategy for TCU when it comes to running the football. Are you just going to attack that pass defense from the outset and then hope maybe later on in the game that'll allow you to run the ball more? Or are you going to mix it in both, or you can try to establish it early? Because that has been the one edge Texas has had this whole year that's going to show up in this game, I think, is their ability to stop the run. And TCU, Robbie, at times too, has actually done a very good job of running their way out of a hole, right? I think the Kansas State game was a great example of how they ran their way out of that deficit. They really rode the offensive line and Kendra Miller to get themselves back and then ahead in that football game. So I'm very curious. That's where I think this game will be decided is, if Quentin Johnston, if he does not play, I'm really concerned for TCU. They need him.
So it's interesting though you say that about Texas's rush defense. I just went to check because I knew they were doing some good things. They are number one when it comes to conference only stats when it comes to stopping the team rushing the ball. They're currently first, only allowing 120 yards per game.
Right.
What's scary though is TCU is also number one at running with what an unbelievable number, 221 rushing yards per game. By far leading the conference. That's very interesting by the two. But when it comes to Texas defense, I've actually been kind of impressed with them. We talked with Jalen Ford yesterday on Big 12 radio. I think he has a real chance to be Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Leads the league in tackles, has done a lot of things interception wise. The story that we have buried from this, and I think you know where I'm going with this, is the Gary Patterson battle. You go to Austin,
right?
You have Gary Patterson, who's now working for Texas. He's recruited and gotten most of these players at TCU. And also, I'm pretty sure he wants to beat the hell out of TCU. I think getting fired from something when you are that program, you are the program. I think he's going to take this very personally. He's not the defensive coordinator, but I'm sure that he has been a very important part of scouting and understanding and making sure that defense is much better. So, and I also think it's going to be a rallying cry within this team.
Yeah. Well, what you see a lot of times is with those guys who are those assistants is that, the analysts, they get specific games, right? And we were told that the Alabama game was a game that GP was very much relied upon for the defensive game planning. I would assume that this is another one where you toss in his direction. What's interesting here, and I forgot who were we talking to the other day, but somebody had basically said to us, look, TCU as a team has really kind of moved on from, and how do you not, right? Those guys, sure, they're very thankful for GP, but what they're working on right now is a really special season, right? They are in one of those. And with how much success they're having, I don't think there's a whole lot of impetus for those guys to want to beat GP. That's the guy who, they didn't flourish under him, but that's the guy, for some of them did. That's the guy who brought them there, right? That's the guy who got them there. And now Sonny Dykes is the guy who's getting them there in terms of their quality of play. So I don't really think that's the way that they view it at all. And I think it's definitely more of a one-way street. I think Gary Patterson desperately wants to beat TCU. Maybe there is some let's go beat our old coach, but Do you feel like you agree with that? Like, I don't think that's how TCU's TCU's offense is like, guys, we got to hang 40 on old GP today.
Yeah, and I think it's a little different just because he's not necessarily a coach there. He's more just
Right.
like an analyst, and also, like, what do they care? Like, like really,
Right.
like, they're in a better position now. I think I think he's just spiteful. Like, you get fired from that. It's not like those TCU players, like, got cut by Gary Patterson. Like, they
Right.
got an amazing situation. They got put there, and now they get to be undefeated and maybe in the college football playoff.
Right.
Um, just a really interesting game with that. I
Oh
think
yeah.
would you say it's the most not interesting, most important Big 12 game remaining in the season?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, I'm not sure anybody's going to frame it like this, but if you think about big picture, like this is kind of what the Big 12 versus the SEC argument really is about. It comes down to. I mean, that Texas team right now has got the SEC talent, and
Right.
100% it does. TCU and under Gary, I think it's important that we note this too. Like the way he built that program, they were able to mold guys into really really good NFL like NFL caliber players. And think about all the guys that TCU and Gary Patterson sent to the NFL, from whether it was the Mountain West all the way up to the Big 12 days. And I mean, look at the group of like the collection of absolute super freaks in the wide receiver room. I mean, think about like I get Savion Williams and Johnson confused because of how big they are, Robbie. I'm like, oh, he's targeting Quentin Johnson there. No, that's Savion Williams and Tay Barber. And I mean, Darius Davis is a speed demon. Like, can't catch
Right.
that guy. And DeMercado caught a touchdown today. And Kendre Miller has been so consistent. I mean, TCU is the proof that you can do a little bit of what's done in the SEC in the Big 12. And I think like that kind of, while not on a recruit by recruit basis, no, it's going to be Texas. It's going to be Oklahoma. It's going to be the SEC versus the Big 12, right? It's always been Texas and OU and everybody else in recruiting. It's always been the SEC, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and everybody else in recruiting. Like this is kind of that this symbolically shows you like that you can get guys and develop them into, what's Quentin Johnson being considered? Well, one of the top receivers in the next draft. Ironically, the guy who brought all of those players into TCU is actually on the Texas sideline, which is the funny part about it. So yeah, and I'm not saying this is a Big 12 versus SEC thing, but I do think if you think about like, can a Big 12 team athlete wise look like an SEC team? If developed correctly, I mean, yeah, I mean, Darius Davis, he looks like he belongs on an SEC field in terms of his speed. Like you saw him take that punt back last week, man. That's what you see in the SEC. Like that's not different. So I think there is a little bit of that in my opinion, which makes this game even more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think you nailed it, and I didn't even think about it. This is more like a metaphor of like new Big 12 versus the
Right.
SEC, like Texas and OU. Like I think TCU is going to be an unbelievable part of the new Big 12 when it comes to football because they are in that Texas footprint. They are near Dallas and they have Sonny Dykes. And then you play against a team who can reload every single year. Like I think about Baylor and I think about TCU, and I feel like even Oklahoma State. There are teams that can win you 8 games every year, but when it comes to being a Big 12 title contender or like a real shot to win it, they can only do that once every 3 years.
Exactly.
Texas and Oklahoma, they could get talent out their butt if they really wanted to next year.
Right.
If they want to go in the portal and get people or even get some 5 stars like and bring them up, like they can do that. TCU can't do that, but like now we're seeing that we can be a little bit more consistent and not have that amazing fall off that like
Yeah.
those teams.
And you mentioned the new Big 12. Let's get to a team here that's going to be obviously involved in the new Big 12, unless that erroneous report about them joining the Big 10 was a thing. Remember that? Wow. LOL.
Yeah.
Kansas won't be a free win in the new Big 12. They're going to be a robust part of the Big 12. And the reason why it's so interesting, Robbie, is that this statement is not a function of, hey, two good teams in Oklahoma and Texas have left, and BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston are more beatable teams. No, we're not. That's not why we're saying it. Why we're saying this is because Lance Leipold's done such a good job. He's gotten in players like Devin Neal and Jalen Daniels. And oh my God, their backup quarterback was a, transfer, obviously, but Jason Bean was a guy who was one of the fastest people. Jason Bean can play wide receiver. Let's be honest. Like he 100% can play wide receiver. He's got, Lonnie Phelps and Jacoby Bryant and Kenny Logan. I mean, they've got legit guys. And when well coached, this team can be just like the rest of the league and part of a very strong, robust, quality middle class.
Yeah. And just the fact that Kansas is going bowling, incredible.
Amazing. Amazing.
I mean, like, they needed a lot of early success in order to do it. But this is a team, when I see, they're not necessarily in the best recruiting footprint when it comes to the Big 12. They're not in Texas. They're in Kansas. But they have a head coach who I don't think is going to be taking another job, and a coaching staff that has been together for many years. And you see the players on Kansas. Some could play at other schools, some could not. Jalen Daniels can play at any school if he really wanted to. Some players, hell no. But what they can do is identify talent when they go in the transfer portal. You fit us. You fit us. We're going to coach the hell out of you and make you successful. And that's what they can do better than anyone else. I don't care if it's Texas. I don't care if it's Oklahoma. I don't care if it's Mike Gundy. Lance Leipold has brought the most out of his talent than any other coach in the Big 12. 100%. Not Gary Patterson. Sonny Dykes has done an amazing job. He has talent. He has unbelievable talent.
Yes.
Leipold does not have
Luke Grimm is not Quentin Johnston, right?
Right. And I think this is only going to get better if I'm a transfer that is on the fringe at a major Power 5 school and I can get a bigger opportunity. And not only that, but to see myself become a better football player, I'm going to Kansas because I want to be coached the best. And I also want to get the ball a lot. So
and play. You can play.
And I see the recruiting numbers. I want them to go up. They're not going to be better than the top of the Big 12. But when it comes to the new college football and getting in talent, when it comes to the transfer portal, I think Kansas is going to be unbelievable in the new Big 12. They're not going to compete for Big 12 titles, but they are going to be a problem every single week for every team. I love it.
There's a reason why I really like the coaches that are like Lance Leipold, that are like Chris Kleiman. They never pop when you announce them as the next coach, right? They never really pop. But the thing about them that's really interesting is at the FCS level, they get these systems down to a science, right? I mean, Lance Leipold got that down at Wisconsin Whitewater and then got to prove it at Buffalo. I would say that North Dakota State is because he made that, Lance Leipold had the extra step in between, right? Whitewater, Buffalo, KU. Kleiman, when you're at a place like North Dakota State, you don't really have to get the extra step. I mean, look, guys, North Dakota State's basically an FBS program as it is right now, operating the FCS. But what do you think North Dakota State does to attract guys? Well, there's a reason why Carson Wentz and Trey Lance were able to go there. They are able to identify guys who either have a deficiency or a raw, whatever it is, develop them, and a lot of times send them on their way to the next level, whether it be offensive linemen, wide receivers, quarterbacks, etc. Why do you think that Chris Kleiman and Lance Leipold have done so well? I mean, when you look at the guys that are the 6 guys that were all conference preseason off Kansas State, Robbie, any of those guys, I don't think any of them were strike you as these unbelievable, incredible recruits, right? They all developed into really awesome, strong players because of because of where they are in the coaching and whatnot. Kansas, same thing, Jalen Daniels, 3-star guy, opportunity to play other places, sure. But it took this offensive system to last year he's kind of running around and doing things. Same thing for Jason Bean. It took the structure to make him into what he is. Devin Neal exploded last week, right? They needed that. But that's not what Kansas's offense was for most of the season. It had to be on that day, and it worked that day. But we talked about the variety and the balance of Kansas's offense that got them to 5-0. It was not the Devin Neal show, right? It was Daniel Highshaw. It was Luke Grimm. It was the tight ends. It was the quarterback. And we talk about Buffalo and Lance Leipold. One year they led the league in rushing. Next year they led the league in passing. It's just knowing, all right, here's the guys that we got. Here's how we got to get them better. This year we do this well. This isn't, we're running the 2-3 zone Jim Boeheim every single year, to use a basketball analogy, right? We have to fit what we do to our guys. And eventually, once that works enough, then you can start recruiting to it. But they do a brilliant job of it. I mean, that entire staff does. And let's hope they can retain them, right? I mean, it's not just, not just Leipold, it's Kotelnicki and the rest of them too that they have to keep.
Yeah, Kotelnicki is the one. That offense has been
it's awesome to watch.
It's the best. And the
It's
fact
so
that you
much
have a
fun.
quarterback like Jalen Daniels is just, I mean, I'm amazed. Shout out
Yeah,
Kansas. They took down the goalposts though. I think it was deserved. It was deserved, but
100%.
you shouldn't do that anymore unless you beat like number 2 Oklahoma State if that ever happens down the road.
Yeah, if Texas wins this week and they get Texas again, I'll be okay with it.
Yes, storm for that, 100%.
Just symbolically, I'll be okay with that.
If
Let's
any
go
Big 12 team beats Oklahoma or Texas at home, I think you should storm because
the rest
you
of
will
the
never
time they're
do it.
there.
Yeah,
Well, it sounds
exactly.
like you're going to get 2 more seasons to do it too. That's from what it sounds
Yes.
like right now. All right, one more. So this one's an interesting question. Why is Neal Brown still the coach at West Virginia? My guess would be what I'm doing right now. I'm doing the money sign for those of you who are doing on the audio side of things. And also maybe they're worried about retaining what is a decent recruiting class. Not going to say it's awesome, but part of that, Robbie, is also like you need to get a new coach in there to make sure you can re-recruit those guys in the recruiting class right now. It's really important to do. So you and I are on the same page. I mean, you should pull the trigger on this. Obviously, the extension was a bad idea. That makes this even harder, but they should pull the trigger.
Yeah, there's no reason Neal Brown should be the head coach. The fact that
Yeah.
you've lost the games that you've lost this year with the quarterback that you have, the offensive coordinator that you have, who was just at USC, Graham Harrell. Uh, we just talked about how Kansas is not going to be the punching bag in the Big 12 anymore. You will be. You will be West Virginia, which is just it's just bad.
Yikes.
Like, I just don't see this team showing any signs. And if you really want to hang on to the 5th or 4th best recruiting class in the Big 12, go ahead. I think you are heading towards a really bad time. I think when you go into the new Big 12, you will be the punching bag. I understand the grass may not be greener with Neal Brown, but I think the grass is pretty brown right now.
Yeah,
So,
no pun
uh,
intended there.
yeah, so it's oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah,
Oh.
the grass is relatively brown. Well, the
Um,
thing is, here's the thing is like you can always bring somebody in also to hit a few guys in the portal, right? And see if you can get that going and try to keep this recruiting class and still, but like, at least try to have an identity. I mean, this is not getting better. They don't do anything. Like I've been saying this all year. You watch them play, Robbie, and I mean, there's a reason why CJ Donaldson, like, okay, CJ Donaldson, who else was supposed to be running back this year? I want to know. Some of these college teams have Robbie. They've got like 6 running backs in the roster, right? I mean, for God's sake, Kansas had like 4 transfers, right? And those guys could all play. So Donaldson and Mathis go down. Justin Johnson and Garrett Green are the only guys who took carries this week, and they don't play defense particularly well. I mean, I like
you
JT
also
Daniels,
have
but
2
like
defensive coordinators, 2
the
defensive
reason
coordinators.
why, the reason why, Robbie, I wanted JT Daniels to go to my Missouri Tigers is I looked at this team and I was like, where are the weapons? I like Bryce Ford and Sam James, but the backup for the freshman fullback is your second string wide running back. Okay, your first string running back because your offensive line's really inconsistent, and Tony Mathis didn't play well enough, and Justin Johnson's trying his best. I mean, this thing was never going to work. It really felt like it was never going to work. And look, they aren't horrible. They played TCU close. Pitt's not very good, but they should have beat Pitt, but they didn't. They've mismanaged some games really badly. I mean, there has been some gross mismanagement by Neal Brown. He's cost him a few games. I didn't like the way the Baylor game was handled. I didn't like the way the Pitt game was handled. I didn't like the way that they managed some of the stuff. TCU game, didn't like the way they managed that game at all. I mean, when were you like, you know what? Neal Brown was pushing all the right buttons. Virginia Tech on the road. They're a 2-win football team. We all like Neal Brown a lot, but the only reason he can still possibly be there right now is because of money, right?
Yeah. Which honestly, I think that some donors should be just like, all right, can we just get rid of this? We made a mistake. We learned never to extend someone who only won 7 games, or no, they've only won 6 games, I believe. I just don't know who the next candidate would be. Like, what is the West Virginia guy? Like when Texas Tech got
Right.
Joey McGuire, it's like that is a perfect fit. You are getting the Texas guy. Like, what is the West Virginia guy?
Well,
is it Nick Saban? Because Nick Saban's from West
Jimbo
Virginia.
Fisher might be available soon. I don't know, but I mean, funny. Like, here's the thing about this, and we think about this all the time about the fit and whatnot. And I don't. When do we start wondering like where does this stuff apply and where does it not apply? Right? Where do like because you think about Brian Kelly at LSU, just not a fit at all. Right. But he's such a damn good football coach that this thing is working out really well for you. Then you got Joey McGuire at Texas Tech. That seems to make a lot of sense. Sonny Dykes was at SMU and did well. Wow, shocking, goes to TCU and does well. West Virginia is in such a weird area because it's not – so the state itself is like – it's not excellent for talent-wise. But you're close to Ohio. You're close to Pennsylvania. You're close to Maryland, specifically Morgantown. It's close to Maryland. It's close to the DMV area. It's close to Virginia. And so it's not like there's nothing around you at all. But ironically, their best teams did really well under Rich Rodriguez and recruiting a lot of Florida guys. And Robbie, I think you're right. Like you and I are calling for it, the firing. And we're not, once again, like we understand this sucks, but like we have to, West Virginia, like that should be we've seen them reach such high heights. And even 100%. Recently with Will Greer and, David Sills and, with guys like that. I mean, Gary Jennings, that wide receiver core was nasty. Like we've seen them come close, but man, I don't know what the answer is. What if Jamie Chadwell? I mean, Jamie Chadwell hasn't been scooped up yet. He's sitting there at Coastal. And it seems like I'm not sure why every single big team just refuses to hire him. Maybe Chadwell comes to West. I mean, I think that's like almost a match made in it. Well, I just thought of that. It's awesome. Jamie Chadwell to West Virginia. Let's do it.
Aggregate that. Put it on the SEO.
Yeah. Big 12.
It's funny that you say that because Neal Brown was like the good football coach that was like, I don't think if West Virginia has this identity, I think that what Neal Brown is like, oh, he's a good football coach. He's going to be good here. That didn't work. So I don't know what the next route is for West Virginia. What you're going to go? Do you get someone who knows the area? Do you just get a really good coach? I don't think you're going to pay big money for anyone. I don't think you're going to just like be like, you know what, let's just do what Kansas did. Let's get Les Miles and see your program burn to the ground. That was a joke. Les Miles is the worst football coach in the last 5 years.
What I'm worried about, Robbie, though, is they might say, well, we got a G5 guy before. We can't go get another G5 guy. And I hate that kind, because you know how people usually go, all right, we hired this last time, it didn't work. We go the other way with this. I really hope they don't do that, because I think somebody like a Jamie Chadwell would be like the perfect type of fit.
They have to go G5. There's no way they could poach another Power 5 head coach. Definitely not a head coach. They could get a coordinator, but like, are you getting? Like,
I mean, the only way you could go not like you go like, I mean, Tom Herman, right? Would you want to do that? Maybe and I'm serious. I mean, like, think about Tom Herman. Think about what's his face, the old Florida coach. He's on the Dan Mullen, right? Do you go that direction? I don't want to retread though. I think there's still a way to get a good up and coming coach, and it goes well. I think there are Jamie Chadwells out there that are. Maybe Ryan Walters, a defensive coordinator from Illinois, I think could be somebody that's interesting too. So
Alex Grinch, but I doubt that.
No, God. His defense aren't even good. We gotta stop propping. Everybody does this too. Yeah, we stop propping up Alex Grinch.
Yeah, we gotta stop saying the same 5 names. It's gonna be someone that we don't expect if they get rid of Neal Brown.
And I mean, if they keep him, like, it's complete Shane Lyons, I have to do this type move. So it's very, very interesting.
His basketball team stinks, and then his football team stinks.
Yeah, I mean, the West Virginia basketball thing too is like, I think it might be. We're getting close, right? We're kind of getting close to.
Yeah, that's my question. I think Bob Huggins gotta. You can't kick him out the door, but you gotta be like, oh, we're
gently shove, gently push.
Like this is what I used to do with my dog. I would throw the treat outside the door, so then he'd know to get it, go outside, and then go take his poo. You kind of have to just throw that.
I wonder what the treat it would be for Bob Huggins' situation. All right, Robbie. We've got a nice 40-minute show today. Where can people find you and your work? Once again, new podcast. Where can the folks find it?
Midwest Madness Podcast, all things Big 12 hoops. If you're not listening to this, or Big 12 Radio on Sirius XM, Big 12. I already said Big 12. Sirius XM channel 375 at the Triano Kid on Twitter. It's basketball season and it's the end of football season. It's a lovely time.
A lot going on. All right, Robbie. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. See you.